His cue, which was to perfect an imitation of myself. Lay both in words and in actions. And most admirably did he play his part. My dress, it was an easy matter to copy, and my gait and general matter were, without difficulty, appropriated in spite of his constitutional defect. Even my voice did not escape him. My louder tones were, of course, unattempted, but then the key, it was identical. In a singular whisper, it grew the very echo of my own. How greatly this most exquisite portraiture harassed me, for it could not be justly termed a caricature. I will not now venture to describe. I had but one consolation in the fact that the imitation apparently was noticed by myself alone, and that I had to endure only the knowing and strangely sarcastic smiles of my namesake himself. Satisfied with having produced in my bosom the intended effect, he seemed to chuckle in secret over the sting he had inflicted, and was characteristically disregardful of the public applause which the success of his witty endeavors might have so easily elicited. That the school indeed did not feel his design, perceive its accomplishment, and participate in his sneer, was, for many anxious months, a riddle I could not resolve. Perhaps the gradation of his copy rendered it not readily perceptible, or more possibly, I owed my security to the most masterly air of the copyist, who, disdaining the letter, which in a painting is all the obtuse can see, gave but the full spirit of his original for my individual contemplation and chagrin. I've already more than once spoken of the disgusting air of patronage which he assumed toward me, and of the frequent officious interference with my will. This interference often took the ungracious character of advice not openly given, but hinted or insinuated. I received it with a repugnance which gained strength as I grew in years. Yet, at this distant date, let me do him the simple justice to acknowledge that I can recall no occasion when the suggestions of my rival were on the side of those errors or follies so unusual to his immature age and seeming inexperience, that his moral sense, at least, if not his general talents and worldly wisdom, were far keener than my own, and that I might, today, have been a better and thus happier man, had I less frequently rejected the counsels embodied in those meaning whispers, which I then but too cordially hated and too bitterly despised. As it was, I at length grew restive in the extreme under his distasteful supervision, and daily resented more and more openly what I considered his intolerable arrogance. I have said that in the first years of our connection as schoolmates, my feelings in regard to him might have been easily ripened into friendship. But in the latter months of my residence at the academy, although the intrusion of his ordinary manner had beyond doubt in some measure abated my sentiments, in nearly similar proportion, partook very similar very much of positive hatred. Upon one occasion he saw this, I think, and afterward avoided or made a show of avoiding me. It was about the same period, if I remember right, that in an altercation of violence with him, in which he was more than usually thrown off his guard, and spoke and acted with an openness of demeanor rather than foreign to his nature. I discovered, or fancied I discovered, in his accent, his air, and general appearance, a something which first startled and deeply interested me, by bringing to mind dim visions of my earliest infancy, wild, confused, and thronging memories of a time when memory herself was yet unborn. I cannot better describe the sensation which oppressed me than by saying that I could with difficulty shake off the belief of my having been acquainted with the being who stood before me at some epoch very long ago, some point in the past even infinitely remote. The delusion, however, faded rapidly as it came. And I mention it at all, but to find the day of the last conversation I there held with my singular namesake. The huge old house, with its countless subdivisions, had several large chambers communicating with each other, where slept the greater number of the students. There were, however, as must necessarily happen in a building so awkwardly planned, many little nooks or recesses, the odds and ends of the structure, and these the economic ingenuity of Dr. Bransby had also fitted up as dormitories. Although, being the merest closets, they were capable of accommodating but a single individual. One of these small apartments was occupied by Wilson. One night, about the close of my 5th year at the school, and immediately after the altercation just mentioned, finding every one wrapped in sleep, I rose from bed and, lamp in hand, stole through a wilderness of narrow passages from my own bedroom to that of my rival. I have been long plotting one of those ill-natured pieces of practical wit at his expense, in which I had hitherto been so uniformly unsuccessful. It was my intention now to put my scheme in operation as I resolved to make him feel the whole extent of the malice with which I was imbued. Having reached his closet, I noiselessly entered, leaving the lamp, with a shade over it, on the outside. I advanced a step and listened to the sound of his tranquil breathing. Assured of his being asleep, I returned, took the light, and with it approached the bed. Close curtains were around it, which, in the prosecution of my plan, I slowly and quietly withdrew when the bright rays fell vividly upon the sleeper and my eyes at the same moment upon his countenance. I looked, and a numbness, an iciness of feeling instantly pervaded my frame. My breast heaved, my knees tottered, my whole spirit became possessed with an objectless yet intolerable horror. Gasping for breath, I lowered the lamp in near proximity to the face. Were these the lineaments of William Wilson? I saw indeed that they were his, but I shook as if with a fit of the ague, in fancying they were not. What was there about them to confound me in this manner? I gazed, while my brain reeled with a multitude of incoherent thoughts. Not thus he appeared, assuredly not thus. In the vivacity of his waking hours. The same name, the same contour of person, the same day of arrival of the academy. And then his dogged and meaningless imitation of my gait, my voice, my habits, and my manner. Was it in truth within the bounds of human possibility that what I now saw was the result within the bounds of merely of the habitual practice of this sarcastic imitation? Awe-stricken, and with a creeping shudder, I extinguished the lamp, passed silently from the chamber and left at once the halls of that old academy, never to enter them again. After a lapse of some months spent at home in mere idleness, I found myself a student at Eton. The brief interval had been sufficiently to enfeeble my remembrance of the events at Dr. Bransby's, or at least to effect a material change in the nature of the feelings with which I remembered them. The truth, the tragedy of the drama was no more. I can now find room to doubt the evidence of my senses, and seldom caught up the subject at all, but with wonder at the extent of human credulity. And a smile at the vivid force of the imagination which I hereditarily possessed. Neither was this species of skepticism likely to be diminished by the character of the life I had at Eden. I led at Eden. The vortex of thoughtless folly into which I there so immediately and so recklessly plunged washed away all but the froth of my past hours, engulfed at once every solid or serious impression, and left to memory only the various levities of a former existence. I do not, however, wish to trace the course of my miserable profligacy here. A profligacy which set at defiance the laws which eluded the vigilance of the institution. 3 years of folly passed without profit had but given me rooted habits of vice, and added in a somewhat unusual degree to my bodily stature, when, after a week of soulless dissipation, I invited a small party of the most dissolute students to a secret carousal in my chambers. Carousal in my chambers. We met at a late hour of the night, for our debaucheries were to be faithfully protracted until morning. The wine flowed freely, and they were not wanting other, perhaps, more dangerous seductions, so that the grey dawn had already fadedly appeared in the east, while our delirious extravagance was at its height. Madly flushed with cards and intoxication, I was in the act of insisting upon a toast of more than wonted profanity, when my attention was suddenly diverted by the violent, although partial, unclosing of the door of the apartment, and by the eager voice of a servant from without. He said that some person, apparently in great haste, demanded to speak with me in the hall. Wildly excited with wine, the unexpected interruption rather delighted than surprised me. I staggered forward at once, and a few steps brought me to the vestibule of the building. In this low and small room there hung no lamp, and now no light at all was admitted, save that of the exceedingly feeble dawn which now made its way through this semicircular window. As I put my foot over the threshold, I became aware of a figure of a youth about my own height, inhabited in a white kerseymere morning frock, cut in the novel fashion of the one I myself wore at the moment.